Dr. Ben Hayes crouched beside the ancient stone tablet, carefully brushing away centuries of dust. The ruins on Haven's Rest were more extensive than anyone had first realized. What looked like a simple settlement from orbit turned out to be the remains of a sophisticated city that had once housed nearly 1 million beings. Ben was a xenanthropologist, which meant he studied alien cultures and civilizations. He had been working in these ruins for 3 months now, and every day brought new discoveries about the Cathari people who had lived here so long ago. Dr. Hayes called Amanda Pierce, one of his research assistants. "You need to see this." Ben stood up, his knees protesting after hours of careful excavation work. Amanda was standing near what appeared to be the entrance to a large building. The doorway was covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. "What did you find?" Ben asked, walking over to join her. Amanda pointed to the carvings. "Look at this sequence. I think it shows the history of their civilization, but the ending is different from what we expected." Ben studied the stone images carefully. The carvings showed the Cathari at different stages of their development. Early images showed them living in small groups, creating art, playing music, and telling stories around fires. Later images showed them building cities, developing technology, and spreading to other worlds. But the final sequence of carvings was puzzling. It showed the Cathari abandoning their art, their music, and their stories. The images depicted them focusing only on work, on efficiency, on extracting resources from their worlds. And then gradually, the cities became empty. "They didn't die from war or disease," Amanda said quietly. "They just stopped being creative, stopped caring about beauty and art and culture, and somehow that killed their civilization just as surely as any disaster would have." Ben felt a deep sadness as he looked at the final carvings. The last image showed a single Cathari standing alone in an empty city, looking up at the stars. That evening, Ben sent his daily report to Dr. Maria Santos back on Terra Verde and to Admiral Carter on the space station. But he also sent a copy to the Haven's Rest Cultural Committee, a group of colonists who were planning the memorial concert for the Cathari. Meanwhile, 300 light-years away on New Dakota, something remarkable was happening in the colonies. Theater. Mayor Carl Peterson stood on the small stage, looking out at an audience of 200 miners, farmers, technicians, who had come to see the evening's performance. "Friends," Carl said, "tonight we're going to do something that might seem strange for a mining colony on the edge of human space. We're going to perform a play that was written over 400 years ago by a man who never could have imagined that his words would be spoken on a world like this." The audience laughed and applauded. Carl had been a professional actor on Earth before volunteering to lead the New Dakota colony. He was 65 years old, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes, but when he spoke about theater, he seemed to glow with energy. "But first," Carl continued, "I want to talk about why we're doing this. Last week, our geological survey team found something interesting in the northern mountains. They found ruins, very old ruins, from a species that lived here thousands of years ago." The audience grew quiet, listening intently. "We don't know much about these people yet," Carl said, "but we found evidence that they loved stories just like we do. They carved pictures on stone walls that show them gathering together to share tales and songs. They were storytellers, just like humans are storytellers." Carl paused, looking around the theater that the colonists had built with their own hands. "So, tonight when we perform Romeo and Juliet, we're not just entertaining ourselves. We're honoring the idea that stories matter, that art matters, that beauty matters. We're saying that even here, even on a world where we dig in the ground all day looking for rare metals, we still remember what makes us human." The play that followed was not professional quality. The costumes were simple, the set was basic, and some of the actors forgot their lines. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that 200 people who worked hard physical jobs all day had chosen to spend their evenings celebrating something beautiful. High above New Dakota, hidden in the asteroid belt, another Galactic Council observation ship recorded everything. The ship's commander, a being called Kethmer, from the ancient ethereal race, watched the human performance with growing amazement. The ethereals were the oldest species in the Galactic Council. They had been exploring space for over 50,000 years, and they had seen hundreds of species rise and fall. They understood the patterns of civilization better than anyone, but humans were breaking all the patterns. "Commander," said the ship's analyst, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made of crystal. "I've completed the comparison analysis you requested. The data is very strange." "Show me," Kethmer replied, his telepathic voice echoing. In the minds of his crew, the analyst projected a holographic display that showed data from 12 different human colonies. Each colony had detailed information about resource production, population growth, and infrastructure development. But the display also showed something else: cultural activity. "Every human colony shows the same pattern," the analyst explained. "Within the first year, they establish what they call cultural centers. Within the second year, they begin creating original art, music, and literature inspired by their new worlds. And within the third year, they start studying and preserving any alien artifacts or ruins they discover." Kethmer studied the data carefully. In 50,000 years of observing other species, the ethereals had never seen anything like this. "There's more," the analyst continued. "I've been monitoring their communications. Humans have established something they call the Interstellar Cultural Heritage Network. They're sharing discoveries about extinct civilizations across all their colonies, and they're creating databases to preserve the knowledge of species that died out thousands of years ago." This was unprecedented. Most species, when they found ruins or artifacts from extinct civilizations, studied them for useful technology and then moved on. Some species collected artifacts as trophies. A few species avoided ruins entirely, considering them unlucky. But humans were doing something completely different. They were trying to resurrect the cultures of dead civilizations, to understand them, to honor them, and to make sure they were never completely forgotten. "Commander," the analyst said quietly, "there's something else. The humans on Terra Verde have successfully translated some ancient Cathari music. They're planning to perform it at their memorial concert next month." Kethmer felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: surprise. The Cathari had been extinct for over 2,000 years. Their ruins existed on dozens of worlds, but no species had ever tried to understand their culture beyond studying their technology. "And sir," the analyst added, "they're not just performing the music, they're teaching it to their children. Human young ones are learning songs from a species that died before humans even developed space travel." Kethmer made a decision that would change everything. He activated the ship's quantum communication system and sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council headquarters. The message was simple: we need to talk to them now. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of Earth's largest space station. Watching the data streams from humanity's farthest colonies, she had been in charge of Human Space Command for 12 years, and every day brought new reports that made her proud of what her species was accomplishing among the stars. Today's reports were especially interesting. The colony ship Aurora had just established a new settlement on a planet they were calling Haven's Rest, according to Captain Nina Ross. The colonists had not only built their basic shelters and power systems, but had also started construction. On something unusual, Admiral called Lieutenant Ben Walsh from his station. "Captain Ross is sending another update from Haven's Rest. You're going to want to see this." Lisa walked over to Ben's workstation. On the screen was a video message from Captain Ross, a tough woman in her 50s who had been leading colony missions for 20 years. Nina stood in front of what looked like a large construction site, but it wasn't a factory or mining facility. "Admiral Carter," Nina said in the recording, "I wanted to give you an update on our progress. The colonists have completed the basic infrastructure ahead of schedule. All families have proper housing, the water purification system is running perfectly, and the solar collectors are producing more power than we need." Lisa nodded. This was normal for human colonies. They were efficient and well organized. "But I wanted to show you what they decided to build next," Nina continued. Camera turned to show the construction site behind her. The colonists voted, and they decided their first major project should be this. The camera focused on a large building taking shape. It had tall windows and a curved roof that looked almost like a flower opening to the sky. "It's going to be a community center," Nina explained. But not just any community center. The plans include a library, a concert hall, an art studio, and classrooms for children and adults. They're calling it the Haven Cultural Center. Lisa smiled. This was exactly what Pope Robert Prevost had been talking about in his recent speeches, about human expansion. The interesting part, Nina continued, is that they're not just building it for themselves. Yesterday, our exploration team found ruins about 50 kilometers from the colony. They're definitely alien, probably about 1,000 years old. The colonists have decided to include a section in the cultural center to display and study these artifacts. They want to learn about whoever lived here before us. Far above Haven's Rest, hidden in the shadow of the planet's largest moon, the Galactic Council observation ship recorded every word of Nina's message. Ambassador Zextel watched with growing confusion. "This makes no sense," said Claxmore, the military strategist. His insect-like body clicked with agitation. "They found evidence of a previous civilization, and instead of studying it for military advantage or economic value, they want to honor it." Ambassador Zextal was quiet for a long moment. The species, the Centaurians, had expanded across dozens of star systems over thousands of years. When they found ruins or artifacts from other species, they cataloged them, studied them for useful technology, and then moved on. The idea of building a memorial or cultural center was completely foreign to them. "Send this data to the council immediately," Zextal ordered, and request permission to observe more human colonies. "We need to understand if this is normal behavior or just an unusual case." Back on Earth, Admiral Carter was reviewing similar reports from other colonies. New Dakota, a mining colony that had been established 2 years ago, had just completed something called the Prairie Theater. The miners were planning to perform something called Romeo and Juliet by an ancient Earthwriter named Shakespeare. Terra Verde, an agricultural colony, had built a massive library that contained not only human books and digital archives, but also detailed studies of the local plant and animal life. The colonists there weren't just growing earth crops. They were carefully studying the native ecosystem and finding ways to blend earth agriculture with local plants. What made this even more unusual was that Terra Verde had also discovered ruins from an ancient civilization. But instead of just excavating the ruins for artifacts, the colonists had established what they called the Terravator Archaeological Institute. They were training their own people to become archaeologists and xenanthropologists. Lisa Carter had been a military officer for 30 years. She understood logistics, strategy, and resource management. What the human colonies were doing should have been inefficient and wasteful. They were spending time, energy, and resources on things that didn't directly help with survival or expansion. But the strange thing was, it seemed to be working better than anyone had expected. The colonies were more stable than the computer models had predicted. People were happier, more productive, and more willing to stay long-term. Crime rates were almost zero. Mental health problems were rare. Perhaps most importantly, the colonies were attracting more volunteers than they could accept. Lisa's computer chimed with an incoming message marked as urgent. It was from Dr. Maria Santos, a historian who had been working with the Terra Verde colony. "Admiral Carter," Maria's message began, "I wanted to report something extraordinary. We've made significant progress in translating the written language of the civilization that existed here before us. They called themselves the Cathari, and they were apparently very advanced in both science and arts." The message continued with details about the Cathari culture, but one part caught Lisa's attention immediately. The most interesting discovery is their final records. The Cathari didn't die out from war or disaster. They seem to have gradually lost interest in maintaining their civilization. Their final writings suggest they became focused only on efficiency and resource extraction. They stopped creating art, stopped telling stories, stopped celebrating life. Within a few generations, their society just faded away. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The colonists here have decided to do something unprecedented. They want to recreate some Cathari art and music based on our translations. They're planning a memorial concert to honor this lost civilization. They say that just because the Cathari are gone doesn't mean their culture has to be forgotten forever. As Lisa finished reading the message, she began to understand something important about what humans were doing in space. They weren't just building colonies. They weren't just expanding their territory. They were becoming guardians of something much more precious than land or resources. They were becoming guardians of consciousness itself, of the idea that every thinking species that had ever existed deserved to be remembered and honored. On the hidden observation ship, Ambassador Zexthal received new orders from the Galactic Council. The Council wanted detailed reports on human behavior, and they wanted them quickly. 3 different alien species had detected unusual patterns in human expansion. The Council was beginning to worry. But it wasn't the kind of worry they usually had about expanding species. Usually they worried about military threats or resource competition. This time, they were worried about something they didn't understand at all. They were worried that humans might be doing something that would change everything. Jake Morrison adjusted his tie and looked at the camera with his famous smile. The studio lights were bright and warm, just like every other night for the past 15 years. His talk show was one of the most popular programs on Earth, broadcast. Over 2 billion people across the home planet and all the human colonies in space. Tonight was going to be special. His guest was someone everyone loved, someone who had been making movies for over 150 years. Thanks to the amazing medical technology humans had developed in the 2100s, people could live much longer now. Some of the greatest actors, writers, and artists from the old days were still alive and working. "Good evening, everyone," Jake said to the camera. "Welcome to Late Night with Jake Morrison. I'm your host, and boy, do we have a treat for you tonight. Our guest has been in more movies than anyone can count. He's fought robots, saved the world more times than we can remember, and somehow still looks amazing at 193 years old. Please welcome the one and only Keanu Reeves." The audience went crazy with applause as Keanu walked onto the stage. He looked just like he did decades ago, maybe with a few more smile lines around his eyes. He wore a simple black suit and moved with the same calm, gentle way he always had. People loved him not just because he was a great actor, but because he was genuinely kind to everyone he met. Keanu sat down in the guest chair and smiled at Jake, then waved to the audience. "Thank you," he said in his soft voice. "It's great to be here, Keanu, my friend," Jake said. "You look fantastic. What's your secret?" "Besides the life extension treatments, I mean." Keanu laughed quietly. "Try to stay curious about everything. Every day brings something new to learn, especially now that we're living among the stars. There's so much beauty out there." Jake nodded. "Speaking of the stars, your new movie First Light is about the early days of space colonization."
What?
"Drew you to that story?" "The courage of those first families," Keanu replied. "Imagine leaving everything you know, traveling for months in a metal box, just to plant seeds on a world no human has ever touched." But they didn't just bring tools and food. They brought their children's favorite books, musical instruments, family photos. They brought their hearts. Far above Earth, in the cold darkness of space, something was listening. A sleek ship hung invisible in the shadow of the moon, its surface covered in materials that bent light around it. Inside the ship, creatures that looked nothing like humans watched every word of the broadcast. The ship belonged to the Galactic Council, a group of 12 different alien species that ruled this part of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for 40 years, ever since humans first started traveling to other worlds. At first, they weren't worried. New species always tried to expand into space. Most of them failed. The ones that succeeded usually became problems that needed to be dealt with. But humans were different. The aliens couldn't figure out why. On the ship, Ambassador Zexthal adjusted his long, thin limbs and focused his large black eyes on the screen. His species, the Centaurians, had been exploring space for thousands of years. They understood how expansion worked. You found worlds with resources. You took those resources, you moved to the next world. Simple and efficient. Humans didn't do that. They did something strange, something the aliens had never seen before. Back in the studio, Jake was asking another question. I heard you met Pope Robert Prevost last week. What was that like? Keanu's face lit up with genuine warmth. Is an amazing man. He's not just a religious leader. He's become something like a philosopher for all of humanity's expansion into space. What he told me really changed how I think about what we're doing out there. Oh, really? What did he say? Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming more thoughtful. Said something I'll never forget. He told me that every human colony ship that leaves Earth must carry 3 things that most people might think are unnecessary. Jake raised his eyebrows. What 3 things? Seeds from Earth, musical instruments, and teachers who can tell stories. Keanu paused, letting that sink in. But then he explained why, and it made perfect sense. On the alien ship, Ambassador Zexel felt his heart speed up. Other members of his team were suddenly paying attention to military strategist Claxmore, who looked like a giant insect with too many arms, stopped what he was doing and focused on the screen. Seeds, instruments, and storytellers, Jake repeated. That does seem unusual for space colonization. Why those things? Keanu smiled, that gentle smile that had made him famous for over a century. Pope Prevost said, "We're not just spreading human bodies across the stars. We're spreading the human spirit. The seeds remind us where we came from. The music helps us remember how to feel joy even in hard times. And the stories, well, stories are how we remember who we are and who we want to become." The audience in the studio was completely quiet, hanging on every word. He'd told me something else, Keanu continued. He said that every colony, no matter how small, no matter how dangerous the world they're on, must build 3 things in their first year. Not just houses and factories, but 3 special things. What kind of special things? Jake asked. Library, a theater, and a garden. Keanu's voice was soft but clear, because he said, humans don't just survive, we flourish. And we can't flourish without knowledge, art, and beauty. On the alien ship, Claxmore made a sound like clicking metal. In his language, he said something that roughly translated to "this is impossible." Ambassador Zexthal understood why his colleague was confused. The Galactic Council had detailed reports on dozens of human colonies. They had been studying human expansion patterns for decades, trying to figure out when humans would become a threat that needed to be stopped. But the reports showed something that made no sense. Every human colony, even the ones focused on mining or manufacturing, had built exactly what this actor was describing. Libraries full of books. Theaters where people performed plays and concerts. Gardens with plants from Earth growing alongside local plants from alien worlds. It was inefficient. It was impractical. Should have made human colonies weak and vulnerable. Instead, it seemed to make them stronger. That's beautiful, Jake said. It sounds like Pope Prevost really understands what makes us human. Keanu nodded. He does. And you know what the most amazing part is? It's working. Every report from the colonies talks about how quickly people create communities, how they help each other, how they find ways to be happy, even in the most difficult conditions. Ambassador Zextel looked at his team. We were all thinking the same thing. In 40 years of watching humans, they had never understood this pattern. Now finally, they were beginning to see what made humans so different from every other species in the galaxy, and it was something that had never occurred to any of them. The new Geneva Cultural Center had never seen a day like this one. Pope Robert Prevost stood in the main hall, watching as hundreds of humans and dozens of alien beings mingled together like old friends meeting after a long separation, children. From the colony ran between the groups, their laughter echoing off the walls that displayed art from 17 different worlds. It had been 6 months since Admiral Mitchell sent that first reply to the Galactic Council. 6 months of careful planning, nervous preparation, and growing excitement as humans and aliens exchanged as messages about their shared love of preserving culture and consciousness. Now, finally, they were meeting face to face. Pope Robert watched as a group of young human artists showed their paintings to a tall, graceful alien with silver skin and 4 arms. The alien, one of the Centaurians, was nodding enthusiastically and pointing to details in the artwork that reminded him of paintings from his own world. Near the center of the hall, High Counselor Kethron stood surrounded by a mixed group of humans and aliens, all listening intently as he told stories about civilizations that had died out thousands of years ago. His voice had that musical quality that made even sad stories sound beautiful. The Melodians, Kethron was saying, created music that could heal both physical wounds and broken hearts. Their songs were mathematical equations that somehow became pure emotion. We saved their technology, their medical knowledge, their engineering, but we never learned to sing their songs. A young human girl, maybe 10 years old, raised her hand. Could we learn them now? If you still have recordings? Kethron's large dark eyes seemed to glow with joy. Yes, little one. That is exactly what we hope to do. We want to teach you the songs of the Melodians, and the dances of the Spiral people, and the poetry of the Crystal Singers. And in return, we want to learn your human stories and music. President Ellen Rodriguez stepped forward. She had arrived that morning with a delegation from Earth, but she had spent most of her time simply watching and listening to the conversations happening around her. High Counselor, she said, I want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. You want to share the cultural treasures of extinct civilizations with us, and you want us to help preserve them? More than that, Kethron replied. We want to learn from your approach to expansion. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has focused on maintaining order, preventing conflicts, managing resources. We thought that was enough. But watching your species has shown us what we were missing. An alien that looked like a giant. Butterfly with crystal wings spoke up. We have been existing, but you have been living. There is a difference. Pope Robert felt his heart swell with pride and humility at the same time. He stepped forward to join the conversation. Your Excellency, he said to Kethron, may I ask you something? In all your thousands of years, in all the civilizations, you've observed, what do you think is the most important thing we can preserve? Kethron was quiet for a long moment, thinking carefully about his answer. Hope, he said finally. Every species that creates art, that tells stories, that makes music, they are saying that they believe in tomorrow. They are saying that consciousness is worth celebrating. When we let their cultures die, we let their hope die too. A human child, a boy about 8 years old, tugged on Kethron's robe. Mr. Alien, sir, do you want to see our garden? We grow flowers from lots of different planets. Kethron smiled, an expression that looked strange but wonderful on his alien features. I would love to see your garden, young one. The boy grabbed Kethron's hand and started pulling him toward the door that led to the colony's gardens. They walked. A crowd of humans and aliens followed, all eager to see what they had created together. The new Geneva Colony Garden was unlike anything that had ever existed before. It contained plants from Earth, of course, but also flowering vines from Centauri Prime, crystal trees that sang in the wind from the ethereal homeworld, and dozens of other species that the colonists had carefully cultivated. But the most amazing part was a section of the garden that had been dedicated to extinct species. Using genetic samples and historical records provided by the Galactic Council, the colonists had recreated gardens that had once existed on dead worlds. These are Melodian harmony flowers, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's chief botanist. According to the records, they used to bloom in response to specific musical notes. We've been experimenting with recreating their songs. She activated a small device that played a complex melody. Slowly, the flowers began to glow with soft, pulsing light, their petals opening and closing in rhythm with the music. Kethron stood in absolute silence, tears streaming down his pale blue face. I have not heard that song in over 1,000 years, he whispered. My people heard it once, when we first made contact with the Melodians. We thought it was just pleasant noise. We never understood that it was their way of saying hello to the universe. President Rodriguez put her hand gently on Kethron's shoulder. Would you like to help us plant more of these gardens? On other worlds? In other places? Yes, Kethron said, his voice stronger now. Yes, we want to help. We want to learn from you how to be gardeners of consciousness instead of just managers of territory. As the sun began to set over New Geneva, casting long shadows across the garden, Keanu Reeves arrived with the Earth delegation. He had specifically asked to attend this historic meeting, and Pope Robert had been delighted to invite him. Keanu walked through the garden, stopping to admire the alien plants and to listen to the conversations happening around him. He found Pope Robert standing near a fountain that had been designed to look like water flowing upward toward the stars. "Robert," Keanu said quietly, "do you remember what you told me in that interview? About spreading the human spirit across the stars?" Pope Robert nodded. "I remember. I don't think you realized how right you were," Keanu continued. "But it's not just the human spirit we're spreading now. It's something bigger. It's the spirit of consciousness itself." Pope Robert smiled and looked around at the scene in the garden. Human children were playing with young aliens. Human artists were learning alien techniques, while alien scholars studied human poetry. Scientists from 12 different species were planning joint expeditions to find and preserve more extinct cultures. "You know what I think, Johnny?" Pope Robert said, using the nickname he had called Keanu since they first met. "No. I think this is what the universe has been waiting for. Not just humans, not just any single species, but all conscious beings working together to make sure that no dream ever truly dies." As the stars came out overhead, the garden filled with a soft, harmonious sound. It was the melodian flowers responding to the laughter and conversation around them, adding their ancient song to the symphony of voices from dozens of worlds. And somewhere in the galaxy, on worlds that hadn't heard music in centuries, seeds of hope were beginning to grow again. Commander Alex Turner floated in the observation deck of his deep space exploration vessel, the Wanderer, staring at something that made his heart race with excitement and sadness at the same time. 3 days ago, his crew had detected a massive derelict ship drifting in the empty space between star systems. The ship was clearly not human, and it was very, very old. Commander called his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sophie Grant, from the bridge. "The scanning team has finished their preliminary analysis. You're going to want to hear this." Alex pushed off from the observation window and floated through the ship's corridors to the bridge. The Wanderer was one of humanity's newest deep space exploration vessels, designed to travel farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. Alex and his crew of 42 people had been exploring this region of space for 8 months, mapping new star systems and looking for signs of other civilizations. "What did you find, Sophie?" Alex asked as he settled into his commander's chair. Sophie pulled up a holographic display that showed detailed scans of the alien ship. It was enormous, at least 3 times the size of the Wanderer, and shaped like a curved blade that seemed to cut through space itself. "The ship is approximately 1,500 years old," Sophie reported. "The hull is made from materials we don't recognize, but they're incredibly durable. Most importantly, the ship's data cores are still intact." Alex leaned forward with interest. "Any signs of life?" "No, sir. The ship has been dead for centuries. But, Commander, the data cores contain something incredible. It appears to be the complete historical and cultural records of an entire civilization. We think this might be an archive ship designed to preserve their knowledge after their homeworld was destroyed." Dr. Emma Foster, the ship's xenanthropologist, spoke up from her station. "Commander, I've been analyzing the data structure. This civilization called themselves the Vorth, according to their records. They were a peaceful species that focused on art, philosophy, and what they called consciousness gardening." "Consciousness gardening?" Alex asked. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "It's a concept I've never seen before. The Vorth believed that every thinking being's experiences and creativity added something unique to the universe. They spent their entire civilization collecting and preserving the thoughts, dreams, and artistic works of every species they encountered." Alex was quiet for a moment, thinking about what this meant. "So this ship is like a library, a museum?" "More than that," Emma replied. "It's like a monument to consciousness itself." The Vorth collected poetry, music, philosophical writings, and artistic works from over 200 different species. Some of these species have been extinct for thousands of years. Sophie added, "Sir, there's something else. The ship's automatic. Systems are still partially functional. When we got close enough, it sent us a message." "What kind of message?" Sophie activated the ship's speakers, and a voice filled the bridge. It was clearly artificial, but there was something musical and gentle about it that reminded Alex of wind chimes. "Greetings, unknown travelers," the voice said in perfect English. "I am the archive of the Vorth people. My creators are gone, but their mission continues. I carry the cultural treasures of 217 civilizations. A conscious species capable of creating beauty. You are welcome to learn from what I preserve. May consciousness flourish throughout the universe." The bridge was completely silent for several seconds. "How does it know English?" Alex asked. Emma checked her readings. "The ship's computers have been monitoring our communications since we arrived. It learned our language and customs from our data transmissions. Commander, this artificial intelligence has been alone in space for over 1,000 years, faithfully protecting these cultural treasures, waiting for someone to find them. Alex made a decision that would be talked about in human space for generations. We're going to dock with that ship. We're going to learn everything we can about the Vorth and the civilizations they preserved. And then we're going to continue their mission." Over the next 3 weeks, Alex's crew worked tirelessly to explore the Vorth archive ship. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The ship contained libraries of poetry from species that had died out before humans. Developed writing. It held musical compositions that could bring tears to your eyes. Even though they were created by beings who didn't even breathe the same kind of air as humans, most amazing of all, the ship contained something the Vorth called empathy crystals, devices that could let one species experience the emotions and thoughts of another species. Using these crystals, the humans could actually feel what it was like to be a Vorth, or a Kalani, or any of the other preserved civilizations. Dr. Foster spent hours each day working with these crystals, learning about species that had been gone for millennia. She laughed at Kalani comedy, cried at Zephyrian love songs, and marveled at the mathematical poetry of the crystal-based harmonics. "Commander," Emma said, one evening as the crew gathered for their daily briefing, "I think we need to make some changes to our mission." "What do you mean?" Alex asked. "The Vorth were doing something incredible. They were making sure that no conscious species ever truly died. Even when their bodies were gone, their thoughts, their dreams, their art lived on. We need to continue that work." Lieutenant Grant nodded enthusiastically. "We have the most advanced deep space exploration ship humanity has ever built. Could be doing more than just mapping stars and planets." Alex looked around at his crew. They were all young, all brilliant, all passionate about exploration and discovery, but he could see something new in their eyes now, a sense of purpose that went beyond just human expansion. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. Emma stood up, her voice filled with excitement. "Let's become the new archive keepers. Let's continue the Vorth mission, but expand it. Every time we find ruins or artifacts from extinct civilizations, we don't just study them, we preserve them. We learn their songs, we understand their dreams, and we make sure they're never forgotten. And sir," added Chief Engineer Danny Miller, "we could do something the Vorth never could. We could take these preserved cultures back to human space. We could teach Vorth poetry to children on Earth. We could perform Kalani dances in our theaters. We could make these extinct civilizations part of human culture." Alex felt a chill of excitement run through him. This was bigger than exploration. This was about making sure that consciousness itself never truly died. "Do it," he said simply. "Send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell her we're extending our mission. Tell her we've found something that changes everything about why humans are in space." "What should I tell her we found, sir?" Sophie asked. Alex looked at the view screen, where the ancient Vorth archive ship floated peacefully in the starlight. "Tell her we found our purpose." Admiral Tony Mitchell stood in the war room of the Human Defense Fleet headquarters, staring at a message that had appeared on his secure communication terminal just minutes ago. The message was unlike anything he had ever received in his 30 years of military service. It was written in perfect English, but the sender was definitely not human. "Admiral Mitchell of the Human Defense Fleet," the message began. "We are the Galactic Council, representatives of 12 species that govern this region of space. We have been observing your expansion for many years. Request immediate diplomatic contact. This is not a threat. We simply wish to understand what you are doing among the stars." Tony read the message 3 more times before calling his aide. "Colonel Janet Torres." Janet had been his second in command for 5 years, and she was one of the smartest officers he had ever worked with. "Janet, get me Admiral Carter on the line immediately," Tony said. "Office. Tell them we have a Code 7 situation." Code 7 was the military term for first contact with an alien civilization. It was something they had planned for, trained for, and hoped would never actually happen. Within an hour, Tono was in a secure video conference with Admiral Carter, President Ellen Rodriguez, and the heads of every major human space organization. The president looked calm, but Tony could see the tension in her eyes. "Admiral Mitchell," President Rodriguez said, "tell us exactly what happened." Tony shared the alien message with the group. The room was completely silent as everyone read the words. "They've been watching us," Admiral Carter said quietly, "for years. That means they have technology we don't know about, ships we can't detect." The question is," said Dr. Paul Hayes, the head of the Human Space Exploration Council, "why are they contacting us now? What changed?" Before anyone could answer, Tony's communication terminal chimed again. Another message had arrived, this one much longer than the first. "Admiral Mitchell," Tony read aloud, "we are sending this additional information to help you. Understand our intentions. We are not your enemies. We have observed 12 species expand into space over the past 10,000 years. All previous species followed predictable patterns, expanded for resources, territory, or survival. You are different. You expand for reasons we do not understand. We wish to learn from you." President Rodriguez leaned forward. "What do they mean, we're different?" The message continued with details that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The aliens knew about human colonies, about the cultural centers, about the archaeological work on extinct civilizations. They knew about Commander Turner's discovery of the Vorth archive ship. They even knew about the memorial concerts in the libraries. "They've been studying us like we're specimens in a laboratory," Colonel Torres said with obvious frustration. "But," Dr. Hayes looked thoughtful, "no, I don't think that's what this is. Listen to the tone of the message. They're not studying us like specimens. They're studying us because we're doing something they've never seen before." The final part of the alien message was the most surprising of all. "We have consulted our historical records," Tony continued reading. "In 10,000 years of observing expanding species, we have never encountered a civilization that preserves the cultures of extinct species. We have never seen a species that builds theaters and libraries before building weapons factories. We have never observed a species that seems to value consciousness itself more than territory or resources. High Counselor Kethron of the Ethereal. Council wishes to meet with your leaders to discuss what this means for the future of all conscious life in the galaxy." President Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Admiral Mitchell, what's your assessment of the threat level?" Tony had been thinking about that question since the first message arrived. "Madam President, if they wanted to harm us, they could have done it years ago. They clearly have superior technology and they've been watching us without us knowing. The fact that they're asking for a meeting instead of just taking action suggests they really do want to talk." Admiral Carter nodded in agreement. "I think Tony's right. But we need to be careful about where and how this meeting happens." Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. "If I may, Madam President, I think we're missing something important here." "What's that, Paul?" "They said they want to understand what our expansion means for all conscious life in the galaxy. It suggests they're not just interested in us as a potential threat or ally. They're interested in us as representatives of something bigger." Rodriguez asked the question everyone was thinking. "What do you think they want from us?" Before Dr. Hayes could answer, another message arrived, and this one was different from the others. It included a video file. Tony activated the file, and the screen filled with the image of a being unlike anything any human had ever seen. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that was both alien and beautiful. "Greetings, humans," the being said. "I am High Counselor Kethron of the ethereal race. I have been alive for over 3,000 of your years, and I have seen many civilizations rise and fall. I have never seen anything like what you are doing. Among the stars, the being paused, and for a moment it almost looked sad. We have made mistakes. We of the Galactic Council. We have allowed magnificent civilizations to disappear completely. The Vorth, the Cathari, the Melodians, the Crystal Singers, dozens of species whose art and music and poetry could have enriched the galaxy forever. We thought their technology was what mattered. We saved their science and engineering, but we let their souls disappear. Kethron looked directly into the camera, and Tony felt as if those ancient eyes were looking right into his heart. You humans are doing something we should have done long ago. We're saving souls. You're making sure that no consciousness, no matter how different from your own, is ever truly lost. You are becoming what we should have been, guardians of the galaxy's memory. The alien leader's expression changed, becoming more hopeful. We wish to learn from you. More than that, we wish to help you. The galaxy is vast, and there are ruins and artifacts from hundreds of extinct civilizations scattered across thousands of worlds. With our help, you could preserve them all. Together, we could make sure that no thinking being's dreams ever die. The video ended, leaving the human leaders in stunned silence. President Rodriguez was the first to speak. Admiral Mitchell sent a reply. Tell them we accept their invitation to meet. But we choose the location, the Cultural Center on New Geneva Colony. If they want to understand what we're about, they should see one of our communities in action. Nodded and began composing the response that would change the course of human history forever. Honored High Counselor Kethron, he typed. We would be honored to meet with you and learn about the civilizations that came before us. Welcome to the human family.